This is part 2 of a 3-part podcast.
Hey, this is T. Blankenship. Have you seen the new video of Wheaton Labs? It is permaculture awesomeness with all new and improved things like more rocket mass heaters, easy bake coffin, Willy Wonka, rocket cooktop 2.0, and the truly passive greenhouse. To see more, go to permies.com/tour. Again, that is permies.com/tour.
Okay, just real quick. Am I seeing this correctly? Did somebody just give me $2? I'm looking at the
$2 and bought a 64-pack of your book.
Wow. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah.
Although, yeah. Okay. Cool. I've seen this a couple of times before on YouTube, but cool. I got $2. And 64 of my Better World book. That is, and I love it. I hope there's 64 people that will actually read it. And I feel so passionately about that book. Thank you. But now back to what Alan is saying. Alan, I agree with your analysis, sir. And the only thing I'm kind of thinking, like, if you're going to teach douchebaggery to your children, I hope your children go down in flames and that they get fucked by whatever's about to happen. And I will point and laugh the whole way. And that for those people that choose to teach their children integrity, decency, and what is fallacy, and your child is amazing and does well with AI, leveraging AI to be above, because I kind of hate to see the douchebags win. And I think if you take a smart kid who's got integrity and decency and give them access to the AI, I think that's kind of the only chance they're going to have against the douchebags. And so I like the idea of them mixing in the decency and integrity and knowledge of logic, reason, and fallacy, and leveraging that with AI to master AI, make AI their personal bitch instead of AI making all those other 98% their personal bitch. And so that's the scenario that I want to see. And as long as people keep teaching their children how to be a douchebag and how to win the douchebag game, I'm just going to get really giggly as they go down in flames. And I don't know what else to do here.
This is interestingly like one of the places where Paul and I are probably the farthest apart, because to me, it's not the kid's fault, right? You have this child that was born, and they had so many possible futures in front of them. And so I don't want to blame a child for a parent that takes all that potential and does something really unwise with it and turns that child into a mess, right? It's like, and the other thing I would say is I've had to work with some of those kids that have come from those families, and even as teenagers, right? And you realize that humans are remarkably resilient in some ways, and that if you can get them to interact with a human being that actually acknowledges their value and their potential, that sometimes they can
their outlook can totally change.
Exactly. They can bounce back from like incredible trauma, right? Yeah. And so, Paul, I would just say I'm gonna put this pretty strongly. I would caution against this kind of approach in saying that in that way, because some of these kids come from backgrounds of profound trauma, and it's like, woo. You know, and some of these kids that are acting out in some of these ways, it's because they've been abused psychologically, physically. It's some deep stuff that we're like working into now, and I've had to work with this in different communities, and so Yeah, I'm just gonna say I'm not gonna go there with you, Paul. I think that, yeah, I mean it is true. The parents are gonna reap what they sow, right?
I'm going to put in my 2 cents here because I also will align more on Alan Booker's perspective. I strongly feel that everybody has an innate desire to want to better their life, better their circumstance. I don't think most people think of themselves as a douchebag. And I think a lot of people are simply doing the best they can.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't look upon others in a punishing way. I think, yeah, that was you had some really strong opinions on that, and I don't agree with that.
I think that the world is getting to be very sleazy, and I think there's been some big change, and I really think it has to do with values at home. And I think that a lot of the teachers are just getting sick of dealing with it. And now while there are teachers that still have hope to find that 1 or 2 students per year that they'll nurture, they're kind of writing off the rest as part of the mass. And today's conversation is about AI and about the permaculture solution to AI. And it's like,
I almost forgot.
And there's going to be the opportunity for 1,000 tangents along the way. And at the same time, I enjoy the fact that Alan Booker and I have such different opinions on this. And I suspect that if we were given 12 hours to explore this, we'd find out that our opinions are actually the same, but just expressed differently. But it's all in the details. But, all right, setting that aside, the next thing I wanted to go to was about trade skills. So we started all of this where there was somebody saying, I'm thinking about going back to college. And then we kind of expanded to be like, what's our advice to anybody going back to college or anybody going to college at all? Like they're going to take on $100,000 of the debt to get a 4-year degree. And then there's been some mention when I've talked about this in the last week or two, a lot of emphasis on trade schools. And my response, and my guess, I think that I'll be the only one probably to have this opinion. My response is that I think that in 6 months we'll start seeing the first of these robots loaded with AI coming out. And there's been talk of how everybody will want to have one. It'll do your chores. It'll cook amazing meals. It's going to be this great household helper. But even more than that, if you need medical attention, they will provide possibly better medical care than you could get in a hospital. If you need plumbing in your home done, it will be preloaded with the experience of the world's 1,000 best plumbers. Same for an electrician. Same for the trades. Now, apparently, the first versions of this are 6 months out, and we know they're going to be clunky. And then at the same time, whatever comes 4 months later will probably be 2 or 3 times better. Whatever comes out 4 months after that will probably be 2 or 3 times better than that. So our conversation is about, we started with the idea of this woman probably going to go to college for 2 years. And what's the job market going to look like after 2 years? Now, I think most of your trade schools, it's 2 years of training. And right now, there is massive demand for skilled mechanics and skilled trades. But is that going to change in 2 years? So like if a person's contemplating going to 2 years of school and they have to go into debt for 2 years of school, when they come out, I don't know whether or not the robots will have gotten there yet, but I think that the robots are going to be there, I think in 2 years, but I think some people here are going to say, yeah, they'll be there, but it'll be 5 years. So, all right, starting with Alan, where are we at on that front?
I have a very sophisticated algorithm for determining, and it's been really pretty accurate, and it's like this. I take the most optimistic estimates, and those usually come from the people who are selling something or talking their book and so forth. And I take the most pessimistic, estimates, and I kind of go to the messy middle, and that's usually about where it winds up, somewhere in there. So, if I took the most aggressive, like Elon Musk estimate of we're all going to be buying robots that do all these jobs in 6 months, I was like, that's probably not going to happen. That's him talking his book and being hyper optimistic. And then people who are like, yeah, it's going to be 10 to 15 years before that even starts to happen, and very pessimistic. Those are the tail ends. And so to me, the bell curve of probability is somewhere in there. So I'm going to guess that we're going to see expensive early versions in the next couple of years that start to, make inroads into very specific high-risk areas first. That makes the best sense. Like, can you put a robot into a high-risk environment where, it would be dangerous for a person to be there, and you can spend more for a very high-end robot and, get a person, and that would be where it will come in, and then it'll probably then work its way down the market into more, low value and more jobs that you could typically get a low wage laborer to do. And so I'm going to say that it'll roll out over the course of a number of years, and that's just probably my best guess if I had to bet on something today from using my messy middle algorithm.
Okay. And now let's talk for a moment about someone's thinking about going to a trade school, a 2-year trade school. Let's say that they're going to take on $40,000 worth of debt to go to a trade school for 2 years. Plumbing. They're going to learn to be a plumber. I just picked it. Are you going to say good choice, or are you going to say ROI looks dodgy?
I would say that the ROI on that probably looks a lot better than your college degree in something like computer engineering right now. I'm going to say that if we got into a situation where resource limitations really started to hit, then things like AI and robots are, how should we put it? You may get to the point where that's what the rich and the upper 10% can afford, and the bottom 60% can't. And as a result, if you're an electrician or a plumber or a machinist or whatever, you got a real skill. Like, you can, regardless of what happens, people are going to need plumbing. They're going to need, things like this done. So I would say it's more likely to remain a valuable skill over the next couple of decades, regardless of what happens, right? Like, if you look at all the different scenarios, not just focused on we're all going to have, more robots than we can count, catering to our every whim, which is a scenario, but I don't know if that's it's not the only scenario, and as a matter of fact, I don't even think it's the most likely scenario. So, yeah, I would say I'd be better with them taking on the lower debt for a more durable skill, than going to get a degree in philosophy from, for $120,000.
Yeah, I guess I'm also not sure exactly what it costs to get into a trade school, and in a lot of cases, I don't think you even need to go to a trade school. You can apprenticeship, or just on-the-job training. And there's people around me that hire anyone, and I know somebody who got laid off from a government job, and they're doing construction right now and on-the-job training. So I think the debt the cost for the trade school is going to be much lower, potentially even less than what you're proposing, Paul. And then on the side of robots doing this work, I can't really see robots doing all these, like fixing a leak under your sink. I have a hunch a robot, even 10 years from now, would make that leak worse and probably destroy something else. Now you look at what the average skilled tradesperson does when they go into your house to work on something, or if they're pulling cable out in the ditch in front of your house, they're up on telephone lines, they're cutting down trees. All these kinds of things are so beyond. You need a set of eyes and a brain and things that humans just have. Maybe I'm out at the tail end of that bell curve, but for an actual AI-powered robot to do most of the trade work, I don't see it happening for a very long time. I'm sure robots in factories that are doing simple assembly of heavy components, yeah, definitely. They're already doing that. But if you're framing up a house, you just follow along behind an actual trade worker and what they're having to do to get things lined up and have it turn out right. I can't imagine a robot cutting trim and putting it on good. Just any number of things. They'd have to have two people watching the robot to fix it whenever it screws something up. It feels like to me. If it's an in-the-house robot, I think that'll just be the toy of the rich. If us normal people can't afford a new car, we sure wouldn't be able to afford a robot that can also fix our plumbing. All the plumbing and all that stuff would still have to be hired in. So, I don't know. That's just my position. I think the trades are going to be very solid for a very long time. Plenty of elder trades folks are retiring. We can't build enough houses. As has been mentioned in the chat several times, Ford is looking to hire thousands of people at over $100,000 a year. I think it's a pretty safe, a much, much safer career path than college.
I think it's easy to say that it's safer than college. And that was the response I was going to have to Alan's stuff too, is like, Alan didn't answer my question. And he evaded it masterfully, I'll say, but still didn't answer it. And the question is, someone saying, should I do it? Should I put in, I'm going to leave behind plumbing and jump into trade. So a lot of trade schools are 2-year schools. And it's going to cost less to attend those schools, like less per year, but you're still going to have living expenses for which the bank's going to loan you money to be able to have a place to live while you're attending school. So rather than $100,000 for a 4-year degree, I'm going to say it's $40,000 for a 2-year degree. And someone's saying, I'm thinking about going to trade school. And then, what do you think, Alan? Should I do it? Now, I think that Alan's response could be something about like which trade exactly. Some trades will be less affected by AI than others. But it's like, so first, as a generic rule, because I think we've kind of concluded that with the 4-year degree, it's kind of like if you're going to go into debt, very unlikely to get an ROI. But Alan, 2-year trade school, $40,000. Should that person do it?
First thing I would say is Mike is absolutely right. Some of these apprenticeships let you come in and do it, and they'll even pay for what training you need, so you're actually earning money while you learn. Yeah. And I think that's a big win because you're learning common sense, right? Which that's a life skill. Right? Going in, doing any kind of construction or any of these trades, you start to learn common sense. And for some people who've been high schooled and college, if they've been into any college to death, they have no common sense. That's a win. But the thing I would say is, this is not hypothetical for me. I have people I'm talking to, they're in their early 20s. This is where they really are. And for some of them, they're like, I want to go become a master electrician. And we've looked at it in their circumstance. The answer is absolutely makes sense. right? And because it gives them this life skill, it's going to, at this point in their life, they can do it. They can get an apprenticeship that helps offset that and so forth. So I can't give a one-size-fits-all answer. I will say that I think regardless of best-case scenario, we're going to need tradespeople. We're going to need a lot of tradespeople for a good while. I agree with Mike on that. I think it's going to stage in over time. So I think we're going to need some tradespeople. I hope that we have some really sharp young people going in that direction, because I would really like to live in a world where I can go into buildings where the plumbing and electrical are actually working, and it's not, raining sewage on my head and catching on fire because we don't have any tradespeople that can keep the buildings running, right? It's like, yeah, it's going to take a while to get to the point of displacing all the tradespeople that make the infrastructure of civilization actually run. So I think that by and large, it is a reasonable path for people who have that particular interest and that particular aptitude. I think but it's not for everybody. So there's no one size fits all answer.
All right. Mike, you got anything else to add to that?
No, I did look up the average cost of trade school if you were to go to one is 12 to 20 grand according to AI. And the nice thing is they're often kind of local, so you can just maybe live with mom and dad for a year or two as you're doing that. So that's all.
Oh, that opens a whole other can of worms.
Well, never mind. Close the can up and keep going.
Yeah, living with mom and dad. I mean, I do think that that's very wise, but oh my, what a can of worms.
And the idea is it's local. You don't have to go a half a state away to go to college. You can go to a trade school probably in your county.
So the amount of debt that you would take on would be less.
Yep.
Less than 40, you might be able to get it done with something less than 15.
Yep, or free, but at least even if you're paying for it. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Alexandra, the question on the table is, going to go to trade school, $40,000 worth of debt, 2 years. What do you think?
I would say this is probably out of my wheelhouse.
Okay.
Granted, my husband and I personally would like to encourage our kids to go to trade school. So that's how we feel for our kids.
Samantha, you got anything to weigh in on this one?
I think it's going to depend a lot on what somebody wants to do. I mean, it seems like kind of a vague idea of, well, should I go to school because then I can get a job? But, like, what do you want to do? If you really feel like you want to have one of these specific trades, then I'd find the path to follow to get what you want. But I think it's really just going to depend on what that person is passionate about. I think that makes a lot more sense, is follow your passions and follow what you want to spend 8 hours a day doing. Because then it won't seem like a job.
So I'm gonna switch gears here quite a lot, because what I advocate for all of these people, because the things that I believe are different, and I'm a little surprised that I'm not getting more support for the whole robot thing, but that's cool. Let's work with the variables on that one. But let's start with Jacob Lundfisker's book, Early Retirement Extreme, and I've got a thing on YouTube where, while writing the Better World book, we interviewed, Sean and I interviewed Jacob Lundfisker for, I think 3 hours, because there's a chapter in the Better World book that explores Early Retirement Extreme and Mortgage Free by Rob Roy and some other ideas on top of that. But Early Retirement Extreme, in a nutshell, basically says, start cutting your expenses and then be extreme about it. Like how extreme can you be? The more extreme you can be at cutting your monthly expenses, the sooner you can retire. So he's advocating for, whereas somebody might be looking at retiring in 30 years, he's saying hey, let's have the conversation about what it takes to retire in 10. And then after we've had that conversation, let's talk about what it takes to retire in 7 years. And once we've had that conversation, let's talk about what it takes to retire in 4 years. And after we've had that conversation, let's talk about getting it down to 2 and then 1. And it's like, now granted, a lot of it is living humbly and then humbler than that and humbler than that and humbler than that, combined with, and this is the tricky part for me, combined with take the difference, the money that you're making that you're not pouring into living expenses, take that money and invest wisely. And that's where I think it's like saying gamble wisely. And it's like, that's where you lose me. So, but I think that the parts where he talks about in his book about, what does the extreme mean in being humble and cutting your expenses, that's some very important stuff. And if you can live humbly and cut your expenses, then I think that your life becomes far freer. Once you get out of debt, now you can do anything that you want, and you can go do, if you want to, like let's say you got $1 million in the bank. Do you want to continue working? Do you want to keep going? And some people do. That's how they want to be. And that's terrific. And it's like, but what a delight to be able to choose what you want to do with your life from a perspective of what sounds cool versus I need the money and I need it now. And I need more than that. So, Mortgage Free by Rob Roy, kind of similar. Cut your expenses, live humbly, and then instead of taking that money and investing it wisely, instead it's going to be save your money up to be your grubstake, and you're going to buy acres, and you're going to continue to work your job while you live in a rather humble shack on your acres. And then you're going to, while you still work, you're going to start to build a humble home. And granted, you may have never wanted to be a home builder, but there's ways to get through that. I love the fact that Ianto Evans would teach a 2-day workshop on building a cob house. And all of the students could then go out and build themselves a home. And I remember seeing a movie once of a guy, one of his students, doing exactly that. In 3 months, he built himself a home. It was a humble home, but he built it himself. And he was not a builder.
I'm Edward Norton. No, not that one, the other one. And I love pies. No, not that kind, the other kind. Hermes is an old-school forum packed full of friendly people who occasionally give out a slice of pie. You'll never forget your first slice of pie. It made me feel so good, I had to buy a whole pie so I could share the love. Oh, and there's apples too. Sign up at permies.com to join in the world of homesteading and permaculture, and you too might get a slice of pie.
I think that Mortgage Free, in many ways, is very similar to ERE, only the goal is different. How do you get to the point that you are a homeowner on land while having never gotten a mortgage, while never have going into debt in that fashion? So then there's the thing that I'm advocating for all of this that we're talking about today with AI, because I think that while it's not a good time to go get a 4-year degree, especially if you're going to go into debt, it's not a good time to go into debt to get any kind of degree, even a trade, even, because I think that soon, in 2 years, we will have robot plumbers and robot electricians, but, robot, whatever those are. But, and they're going to be maybe not as good as the current ones, maybe better. We'll see. We'll find out. But I'm kind of thinking we're about 2 years out. I love the idea of, like, right now, if a person finds themselves without a job for whatever reason, to go and get some on-the-job experience, possibly for a trade, and milk it just as long as you can, but at the same time continue to cut your expenses and live more humbly and prepare. And so a humble home and a large garden. Now, as I talk about a humble home and a large garden, granted, there's a lot of people that kind of feel like, I don't want a garden. I like buying food at the grocery store. I like buying food at restaurants. I don't want to ever garden anything. And it's like, I wish to talk to those people, but let me set that aside for a second. And I also get a lot of pushback on the idea of like, how is it possible for anybody today to acquire, I'm going to use the word acquire a humble home? Rents are through the roof, and the cost of owning property is insane. There's no way that somebody who's, let's say, 18 can possibly buy their own home. So, this is where I'm going with all of this, is I want to say, and granted, all of you are familiar with all of the things I've ever said about getting your own home. Two of you have pursued the skip path, and I want to come to that here in a moment. But there's also, the part where people could come here and be part of what we're doing here. And that's, in a way it ends up being a flavor of free. But I'm hoping that the Permaculture Bootcamp, which I also refer to as Gardening Gardeners, I'm hoping that there will be, in time, 100,000 homesteads across the United States that all offer a Gardening Gardeners program, and people can go to those. I also got this feedback from somebody that I felt like, could have been phrased more kindly, but it was something about like, not everybody wants to live that life. And it's like, well, I think that that's true. I think most people are very much trained to want to live a very posh life with $1 million car and $1 million home, and a first class spouse and et cetera. And it's like, but I do think that there's maybe 20 million people in the United States that think that a humble home with a large garden is the ultimate destination. And I don't have room for 20 million people at my property, but I would be willing to take on 20. So, out of all of this is the thing I'm advocating: a humble home and a large garden. And I got so much to say about all of that. But first, let's go through everybody and see where they're at. Alan, a humble home and a large garden, I believe, is the solution to today's topic. But what are you thinking?
Yeah, let me make it by analogy. It's like we've worked with different communities that were like, we want to be off-grid solar, right? We want to actually, in other words, we want autonomy from the power system. We don't want to have to keep on paying for our power. And my universal answer is the first thing we're going to do is we're going to see if we can redesign what you're doing to use 90% less electricity. Right? That's the first step. Because if you ask me to put solar panels on top of the average suburban home with enough battery to let you run that effectively off grid, you start doing the math on that, how much that's going to cost, how many solar panels, it's like massive. Because the average American home was actually literally designed to be consumptive. It was designed from the ground up to consume a lot more than it needed to drive economic growth and to drive your consumption. So when the American dream was you own your own house, well, what they didn't tell you was that house was designed to make you into a consumer in the literal sense of that word, to consume as much as possible. And so it's like if we rethink that stance of, we're going to actually build buildings that don't need all of that, and we can do it so that you're more comfortable while using 90% less, then all of a sudden the problem of putting a couple solar panels on the roof and meeting that need becomes about 5 times, 10 times easier. And I think that exact same thing happens in life. If you have the designer lifestyle given to you by the prevailing narrative, it is a lifestyle designed to be highly consumptive, highly expensive. Those narratives are designed to keep you in debt. They're designed to require a high income. They're designed to require you to play that game. And so if you're willing to step outside of that and look at the fact that you can have a more comfortable lifestyle for a fraction of the amount of money, then all of a sudden all kinds of new possibilities open up. And, I would say I use the term right livelihood these days. Having a right livelihood, that is a way of producing what you need for yourself and your family and your community that you feel good about morally and ethically, and that meets those needs and provides abundance. And so the whole idea in our culture for a long time has been the only way to have a livelihood, and the right part has been left out. Like, it's just like a livelihood is to have a worky job, as Paul, you like to call it, right? That's the way you do it. And it's the only respectable way of doing it. And what we're suggesting is that that's actually a bit of a con job to try to lock you into that way of thinking, that there are other options, and that one of those options is, to consume 90% less while living more abundantly and producing a lot of that yourself, and finding a right livelihood that is giving back to your community and so forth. And so, I've retired from my worky job, but I'm busier than ever with the right livelihood of trying to help people and regenerate my communities and so forth. It's like that. So, I know that was kind of all over the place, but that was sort of what that provoked from what you said.
I kind of feel like, so when this gal presented me with the question, should I go back to school to get my software engineering degree? And then I said no. Well, what should I study? And I said nothing. And then what should I do? My advice was a humble home and a large garden, to pursue that end. And I kind of feel like step one, you gotta start getting this stuff in your head. What does it mean to have a humble home or a humble life? And what is a large garden? What's that like? How do you do that? So I started talking to her about, you gotta start, if you need to book up, because you're talking about going back to school for years, and so you need to put stuff in your head. I'm thinking the stuff you need to put into your head is large garden and humble home. And then try to move towards that.
What I think I hear you saying, to use your phrase, is this. A humble home sounds like, to me, less mindless consumption.
Yes.
Right? That's code word for let's just reduce all the mindless consumption. And a big garden sounds like, to me, a universe, like a term for produce your own assets, right? Grow your own, produce your own assets. And it could literally be a garden, but for some people it might be something a little different. So, humble home and big garden, to universalize it and put it into engineering language, is drastically reduce mindless consumption that doesn't really improve your quality of life. Decide what are the quality of life essentials, and then create systems that are productive, where you can directly produce a lot of value that lets you get that quality of life. And maybe really healthy, nutrient-dense food is one of those. And so you do want to literally grow a garden, right? And you need a place to live. So a humble home is probably of some sort is probably on the agenda as well. But how about drastically reduce mindless consumption and, or as Mollison put it, switch from consumption to production.
Would you say that this is the advice that you would give to this woman?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So I'm now going to move on to Mike.
Yep. Yeah, I like a modest home and a large garden. The idea in my mind being, if you can stay out of debt, like get to a modest home, especially debt-free. If you're not on the hamster wheel and you don't have that debt hanging around your neck, you have the freedom to pursue that right livelihood. And if you aren't getting up early and going to bed late at a worky job, you have a lot of time to offset other costs in your life. Like a garden saves you a bunch of money on food. Or if you just have the free time to be out and about, you can find deals on things and make connections with and do barters and all kinds of. If you don't want to grow your own garden because you're not into gardening, still by being debt free, you have the freedom to find cheaper ways to live, even if it's not growing your own food and having a milk cow and all that. So,
one way of looking at this is if this woman had $1 million in the bank right now, would she be looking at going to college? Because the whole idea of going to college is so that way you could learn a skill so you can have a 40 years of working. And it's like, if you got $1 million in the bank, are you saying to yourself like, oh, here's what I want to do. I want to go through 4 years of intensive study, trying to get good grades with people who I don't care for. I mean, I know that when I went to college, about 1 out of 4 of my instructors had not yet learned the English language. And my understanding is that ratio is reversed now. But it's like, so it was tough. And then you get into the workforce and it's even tougher. But if you got $1 million in the bank, you're probably thinking like, why mess with that? And so, all right. I'm thinking like, granted, some people went to college and had a great time. I had a great time. And some people go and work and they have a great job. It's just delightful to go there. Not everybody. And sometimes you have a great job and that job disappears. And sometimes you have a shit job and you wish it would disappear and you could get paid as much with a good job. All right. I've forgotten where I'm going with this, but I'm responding to what Mike said. So, Mike, your advice to this woman would be?
To live modestly, not go to college, find a way to live modestly, and, get herself a little place. Yeah. So I guess it'd probably be the trades or some way to get in a position where, she's got a house, a place, a humble place, and a way to grow her own food or have the freedom to achieve her needs affordably and comfortably. And then she might only need $20,000 a year to live off of in that situation. And then she can do that any number of delightful ways with happy coworkers or her own gigs or whatever. If you get to a place where you can live off $20,000 a year, your life is looking a lot rosier.
And to go back to what Alan said, I want to say, I think the garden, the food system, is a critical component to what I'm advocating, which was not part of what Alan was advocating. He was saying, like, you could do that if you wanted to, but it would need to be something, if not that. And I kind of feel like the food system is critical. It has to be food. You have to be able to grow enough food to feed yourself. And, maybe you got a family, you need to feed them too. And so, and granted, if times are tough, it needs to be able to provide 99% of your food. And if times aren't tough, then, half. But that's the other thing too, is I kind of feel like all of the stuff we're talking about is place your bets on your own future. Are you betting on AI or are you betting against it? And what do you think it's going to be like? Where are you going to place your bet? And the thing I'm advocating for is it's like, this is the path that is like the sure win. I like the probability of it failing. I can't see how this could fail. You have a humble
unexpected medical care. I have friends. They live very humbly. They don't need to pay rent. They live in yurts or some capacity of natural building construct on this land, and they really struggle. They struggle. They have, they each have their own gardens. They have the community garden. They struggle to pay for, food for their animals. They struggle to have a varied diet. They struggle to afford to go to the dentist. I think a humble home, as they do, and they live very humbly, they don't have access to some utilities, there are still expenses that come up. And so it would be, I think, more lovely if they happen to have $1 million in the bank. I don't know if I like that generalization anyway either, but we're all engineers, and I feel I fall into the classic engineering, risk adverse mindset. And I don't know if I really fully advise that either. It's tricky to just live humbly, live off the land. They still each have worky jobs that they have to do, and they live well below the poverty line.
Okay, I would like to address that, and I kind of feel like all 5 of us live lives, all 6 of us, if you count Andreas, live lives where we live a flavor of humble, and we at the same time we have income streams, and some are bigger than others. And it's and I kind of feel like part of the idea of having a humble home and a large garden, I think that along the lines of what Alan was saying earlier, you have something that'll continue to be of value. Now, as I'm thinking of this 2 years in the future scenario, and in my mind, the online AI stuff has gotten to be 20 times better than it is now. And I think that the robot version of AI is out and about, and it's kind of getting started. Then I'm kind of thinking okay, let's suppose for a moment in my mathematical head, there's 70% unemployment. Then, what is a thing that I can produce that will be still of value? And food's always a value, and there's a constant need for it. Granted, we talked earlier about the trades, and it's all right, I think they're going to be impacted, but at the same time, let's suppose that the trades aren't really there because the robots are doing such a great job. Then it's kind of okay, well, to get just a little bit of money. Basically, I like what Alexandra pointed out, to go to the dentist. I was going to say cell phones, internet, a little of this and that, some bric-a-brac, who knows what. And it's kind of salt is a good one. Let's go buy some salt. Maybe coffee. Maybe, I don't know. but it's like, okay, so a little bit of income. And
yeah, actually, vanilla is something that is considered like an unhumble item.
Okay. In the scenario of Gert, when I originally wrote the story of Gert, then Gert had an income of, I believe, something on the order of $6,000 a year. And it was, a little of this and that, just here and there. But a lot of it, the majority of it, was from her big garden. And people would buy a few boxes of apples from her, or a few boxes of this food, or a few boxes of that food. And so there was a little bit of this and that people would buy from her very large garden, like her neighbors, people, her friends, people that she knew. And so there was some of that. And then there were little things that would pop up every couple of months. She'd go help a friend with a so-and-so project, and she would get paid so many dollars per hour for helping that person. And it would be like a little of this and a little of that, not a full-time worky job. So she had a little bit of money in that. And so gratitude is basically the thing I'm advocating here. But, all right. So Alexandra, we have this woman, and she's saying, I'm going to go back to school, software engineering. And, and you're saying, like, I know people who have a humble home and a large garden, and it looks pretty sucky from where I sit. And that's like, that is fair. It can be sucky.
There are major trade-offs.
Yes. And there are trade-offs for going to college, and there's trade-offs for going to a trade school. There's trade-offs for learning a trade skill. There's always trade-offs. And so at the same time, I think that right now there are people that are trying to make a good decision, a strategic decision about what are they going to do? What is their plan for the next 2 to 4 years and beyond? And so I think that the whole idea of this podcast, YouTube thing, whatever it is, where we're all talking about it, the idea is let's cover some things to help people make a good decision.
All right. Do we have 8 minutes left to go for this part?
I don't know.
We're going to spill over to past noon.
We'll make the best of it, whatever it is. But so there's somebody sitting in front of you that's talking about going to college. And now it sounds like I've heard you already say your kid's going to a trade school, not a 4-year degree.
Actually, I kind of want to amend that a little bit. My personal hope is to develop a family business, and so they can stay close.
Okay. All right. And what is your advice to this woman?
Good luck. I don't have great advice.
So what I heard you say is good luck. Leave me out of you're crazy. So it's like, don't get me involved in this weird thing you're doing.
I think it would depend. What does her network look like? What kind of opportunities does she have? Connections. What does she want to do? What would be soul building for her?
Ooh. Okay.
I think there are pathways to right livelihood that are kind of predicated on having a paradigm shift. Moving from that consumeristic, convenience laden structure that we're starting, that we're very accustomed to, and changing that to being a producer. When something breaks, can you fix it, or do you just have to replace the whole thing? Or can I make it? Can I make the thing that out of a stick from outside instead of buying a new replacement? It requires so many mental shifts that I think Skip can offer for changing the way you think about choices on a day-to-day basis. But without knowing this woman, I don't really have any direct advice. But it's rough. It's rough.
I like the idea of trying to fish around for networks as well as passions. And so, Samantha, you have a teenage boy. And so
I do. I wonder if we should hear from Mike, though, because he's got to go.
I'm sorry, what?
I wonder if we should hear from Mike really quick because he has to go.
Oh,
Mike,
I thought we heard from Mike. Did we hear from Mike?
Okay. You can hear from me. I have a teenage boy. I encourage him to follow his passions. Find what do you love to do, and find a way that you can earn an income doing things that you love. I think that is going to lead him to a grander version of who he chooses to be.
What is your advice to this woman that you do not know who is thinking about college?
Well, I think that if you can find things that you can do that provide value to other people, then you can find ways to have more income, if that's her goal. If the goal is just to have more income, I don't necessarily think college is the quickest path for that, because it costs a lot of time and a lot of money to try and hopefully, it's a bet. So you hope it's going to pay off, but it will take you into debt. And if she just wants more income, there may be other ways where she can provide value to people around her, making stuff, doing services, helping people that don't put her deeper in debt. So it will really depend on what she really wants. If she really does want a better, more magnificent job in software engineering, then maybe a college is the path. I would think you'd want to find the person you want to work for and go talk to them and find out what is the path that I would need to take in order to work here. Right? Find your ideal situation and then figure out the path to get there. Because I think if you have a goal, you can reach it. But I think if you're just going forward with I'm going to go to college because that's what everybody else does, that's really not a goal. That's just kind of blindly following and hoping. I think we've got to have clear, defined goals.
I kind of feel like when this woman was sharing this with us, the thing that she was kind of trying to say is that it's like she's got 3 part-time jobs right now, and she'd like to be able to transition into higher pay. And I do know that one of the things that I said, I said, I believe a humble home and a large garden. And I said, from between now and then, the thing to do is try to find ways to cut your expenses. But I would say keep working at your 3 part-time jobs and try to save as much as you can to get yourself into a position of resilience in case things go poorly. Now, of course, if she follows my advice and things go poorly, she's really well set. Like for example, if the thing that I'm thinking is coming happens, she's in great shape. On the other hand, if what comes to be in 2 years is more like Alan's vision, or possibly even something else where, everything is just hearts, flowers, and rainbows, I think she's still going to be in good shape. She will have built an amazing safety net for all possible situations. So, and it'll be delightful if things are great, or it'll be ultra delightful if things are not so great.
I'd like to add that it's not that I don't advocate a large garden and a humble home. I do advocate for those. I just don't think that answers all of the questions. And I think it's hard to, do that on year 0, So I think there's a a pretty harsh transition to try to make that work.
Well, okay. It's true. You can't make that on year zero. And I do believe that one of the things I conveyed to the woman was, now is the time to start trying to figure out what this even means. What is a humble home? There's wherever you're living now and whatever you're doing now, and it's a bit like what Alan's suggesting. How do you cut your expenses by 90%? How do you cut your energy needs by 90%? And I think for most people it's like you can't. And I mean, like, we could start to talk about drying your clothes on a drying rack, and we could talk about that. We could talk about rocket mass heaters. We could talk about a variety of things. And I think that you can quickly cut your energy needs by 90%. But it's not day zero. It's not even year zero. It's going to take some thinking, some understanding, some getting your head wrapped around some stuff. But I think that was part of what I told her was start to learn what it means to have a humble home and a large garden. And that's when I told her the thing about the sunchokes. Plant some sunchokes. And what's that? And so we talked about that for a moment. But, start to get this knowledge in your head. And then, but I also said, keep your current jobs and save, create safety, create the part where you are going to be far more resilient than others.
This podcast is continued in part 3.
Hi, this is Mark. Sometimes talking to a friend or family member about permaculture can be met with a blank stare if it's all new to them. A great way to explain some of it can be over a card game using permaculture playing cards, which each have interesting facts with quality illustrations and descriptions. A wide range of people, places, and things, all related to permaculture, can be found on the permaculture playing cards at richsoil.com/cards.